going on, everybody? Welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. This is going to be the very first episode of Source Material that is now going to be on our very own separate feed. I thought that I should do what every good podcast host should probably do, and that's introduce themselves, just in case this is your first ever episode of the Source Material Podcast. First off, who am I? My name's Jesse. I've been reading comics since around the age of 10. I can remember reading and picking up issues of the Marvel event called Inferno. Picking those issues up and reading those. I can remember at the bowling alley where my mom used to go bowling on Thursdays. I'd have a couple comics to read. That's what's about 1988. From then on, I may have had some issues earlier than that, but I remember that would be the first time that I remember sticking with a storyline just so I could find out what happens. And as I got older, of course, the more frequently I began to pick up comics. Really started collecting comics in the Image era, when Image Comics hit in 1992. Actually put a pull list together at my local comic shop and was having him pull Savage Dragon. I was reading Cable, X-Man. Didn't have very many, if at all, any DC comics, but those were the ones that I was getting when I was a kid. So just continued to collect and then kind of fell off of it a little bit in the early 2000s. Wasn't buying anything, just got married and ran out of space and money. So I started picking up new comics again when my son was born in 2010. Really, that's the only comic that I'm getting is The Amazing Spider-Man, and that's really just because I made a commitment to myself to buy every issue of that until my son turned 18, which now is only 7 years away. No, make that 6. He just turned 12. But I also started getting more of a collection through auctions. When I say auctions, I'm not talking about eBay. I'm talking about in-person collections that were going up for bid for really cheap. I probably doubled my collection in the span of like 3 or 4 years just because I was buying things for really, really cheap. And I've got some really good deals too. And at some point, maybe I'll bring those stories up on the podcast. But for now, getting you through this intro here, started podcasting in 2013 as a co-host to a sports podcast called From the Cheap Seats with Jason Teasley. Kind of got my feet wet into podcasting. That was not too long after I had first learned about podcasting. I think I had my iPhone 3 and I found Apple Podcasts on there. I started going through some of the subject matter and I was like amazed that there was all these niche subjects that people were talking about. Lo and behold, I found Comic Geek Speak and I was impressed at their catalog, how long they'd been podcasting, and excited about the fact that I could listen to just people talk about comic books and their experience reading them, plus learning something about comic book characters as well. So that kind of started me listening to podcasts. And then basically I found some podcasters that were working with the local wrestling promotion. That led me to the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. I should say I started listening to Mark Radulich's programs, and then when Teasley got the From the Cheap Seats gig, I then got up enough guts to say, hey, can I pitch doing a show called Source Material for comic book related content on the network? And that's what led to Source Material. So started my own show in 2014. Source Material hits the Radulich and Broadcasting airwaves, and I had decided that Punisher Circle of Blood was going to be the first story that I was going to cover on the podcast. It was one of the first trade paperbacks that I had gotten. I had to start with that book. So that's 2014. I was at least on a podcast every week from 2014 all the way up through 2020 when the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, I became a very essential employee and was not able to continue podcasting for a good while. So finally, a light at the end of the tunnel hits right around late 2021, and I can come back. So I've been podcasting since then, and right now it is February of 2022. I did source material for the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. I'm also on the Metal Hammer of Doom, which is just about every Wednesday, where myself, Mark Radulich, and Robert Cooper get together and talk about a metal album that released recently. I've also done Tripped Up Trivia here monthly since July of last year, and I have guested on plenty other of Radulich and Broadcasting shows like TV Party Tonight, and I'd been on Long Road to Ruin a long time ago. Damn You Hollywood, I've been on a few of those. So anyway, I love podcasting. I love sitting here talking about a subject, especially with a guest. What is source material? The best way to describe source material is a book club for comics. So we get together, we talk about a story arc, and again, earlier days it was just me, but I started bringing on guests pretty early. So usually it's me and one or more people talking about a comic book story arc, or something that's happening in comics, or something that we just want to talk about that's comic book related. So that's the general gist of what source material is. The show is still going to be a Radulich and Broadcasting Network show, so I want to make sure that I get that out there. We just have our own feed now, so, we're still under the Radulich and Broadcasting Network umbrella. We'll be doing things with those guys all the time. At this point, we're over 300 episodes. So you can go back into the Radulich and Broadcasting Network archives, and you should be able to find a chunk of these episodes that we've done since 2014. I hosted about 300 of them. We're coming up on the 300th episode here pretty soon that I've hosted. But when you look at it, according to my spreadsheet, we're I think over 360. So we've got a lot of episodes under our belt just for source material alone. This is going to be pretty much the same show. What are you going to be expecting as we move forward here? It'll all be content that's somehow related or tied to comics in some way. We're still, again, we're with the Radulich and Broadcasting Network under that W2M umbrella. So if you subscribe to the W2M net feed and were listening to my show prior to this, you would have also probably seen something that popped up called Unspoken Issues. And what that is a comic podcast that is dedicated to 90s comics and is in affiliation with the Unspoken Decade, which is a website that is strictly 90s comics related. It holds a lot of blogs and podcasts that talk about comics from the 1990s. So the Unspoken Decade, and we have the Unspoken Issues right here. It's usually me, it's Chris Armstrong, Dean Compton, and Derry Waite, and other guests coming together to talk about 90s comics. So keep an eye out for that. That will be in our feed as well. So we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.